game with me, and so they let me. So my mom and brother came to the game with me, and after the game, they won. And that's when DeMar had like the shoelace thing going on or something.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
arm was hurt or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the glove. He had the glove, and so me and my brother got a photo with DeMar and with Kyle because they had just finished their presser. And so when they were walking away, and they were awesome, and it was just like, you know, interaction. But yeah, I've met a lot of the Raptors people, and you know, definitely by now, I mean, when there's a game that you guys, the Raptors are the road team, I know you guys. We like catch up, we chat. You know, Leo's a good friend of mine. I did this year. I did the Christmas Day game, and when Leo found out I was there the night before by myself, he was like, Christmas Eve, he's like, come spend it with my family. So I got to hang out with Leo and his family, and now I'm friends with his kids. And so, you know, it really is, I'm sure, like it is for you, a family, and on a whole nother level for you. But for me, it's kind of, you know, when I'm there, you know, I've kind of know a lot of people now within the organization.
So what I find interesting listening to this as well, and you know, here you are, a performer yourself, and I'm sure people come up to you, they recognize you from whether it be from television or now your show in Vegas, and we'll talk about that later on, and all the years in performance and in the circus and everything else. But then here you are, maybe it's just going back to that kid inside you, that fan inside you, where you're saying that and I'm sure it's changed a little bit over the years because you've maybe, you know, you're a little more familiar with it and you're kind of a little bit more used to it, but yet there's still that sense of nervousness or that awe that you still get maybe in seeing certain guys and being in that environment. How did you then contain that yourself to be able to perform on a stage in front of, you know, like Simon Cowell and all of the judges and Heidi Klum, and let alone knowing there's millions of people watching you, and on top of that, millions of people who are watching you at home then judging you and essentially controlling your fate with their fingertips on their phones, on their computers with the votes. I mean, that's got to be daunting to think that as much as these athletes might be, you know, important and worth lots of money and they're superstars and they're famous and all this, you're playing up to a crowd on AGT to millions of people in the U.S., let alone across North America and across the world.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that I was just actually talking about this with a friend, because I was like, some things you can't really practice. And as much as, you know, a lot of the tricks, obviously, that I've done on the AGT and stuff are tricks that for the most part I've, you know, done hundreds of times. You know, if there's a percent of how often do you nail this trick at practice, it's like 99 or 100%. I'm very confident in them. But there's something about when I've, like, especially when I was on the show and we had our finals run, I remember, because that one was live and it was in Radio City Music Hall. And I'm also a very emotional person. So as much as I kind of want to live in the moment, sometimes I psych myself out in thinking, like, this is the moment that after this is over, you'll always also look back on. So that really kind of is a mistake of mine, but adds pressure to me. I remember right before, you know, when you're in New York City and Radio City Music Hall, and the director is like, okay, we're going live in 5, 4, 3. And in my head, I remember being like, this is what you've trained for the past 3 months. Like, don't screw it up. Like, this is your moment.
Right.
Because, you know, and that pressure that I've tried to put on myself, but that's why, I mean, a lot of the episodes, if you rewatch them, or for people that haven't seen them, you do see them, you'll see I almost always get crazy emotional when we're done. And I'm almost teary-eyed. And that's just kind of that, like, pressure, like, coming out, because I've realized that moment, like, you finished it. Like, you accomplished it. So now it's like that weight's off my shoulders. And now there is no more weight. When you're on a show like that, you realize, hey, now I've done my job. So now it's kind of up to the audience to vote and decide. But I don't know if I think it's different from, like, let's say a basketball player, and that's a team sport. So that's a little bit different. But mine, you can say, is more of an individual sport, I guess, because, I mean, I've gotten crazy lucky with the pups that I perform with, because they are so good at what they do. And even when they're, like, just playing around, it's cute, so it fits. It doesn't really matter, because I know that whether it's Scooby or Percy or Milo coming up, like, they're cute, they're cool, you know, like, they're doing their thing, but I can't be the one to mess up. And so for me, those moments have always been very pressure-filled moments, and I've just felt like it's out of my control once it's over. So even like on a lot of the shows like America's Got Talent, I think a lot of people think that we're really, some of us are, some have been, but for me, I'm not crazy competitive with the other acts, because I know that if anything, some of the other acts I was technically competing against have become friends of mine, like Matt Franco, who won the year I won. He has his own show here in Vegas, and we've caught up. He's come to my show. I've gone to his show. So we are supportive of one another, because we don't want anyone to kind of leave with that sour taste in their mouth, because that might not even be the difference. People are voting based on what stories they like, or it's just kind of hard to compare. So for me, it's been it's been very much about trying to. The older I've gotten, and I guess it's helped that I've had more of those moments, because now when I have it, I'm like, all right, like it's just another moment. But I've done like 5 rounds on AGT in the finals run, and there were 5 different moments. So if I had messed one up, I had the other 4, let's say. But when you're in that spot, I know for me, I'm not very good at not putting pressure on myself. But thankfully, I've kind of come through. But I do get really nervous still in those opportunities that I just don't want to mess them up, and I don't want to sort of take them for granted.
How much creative control do you have on shows like that in terms of what you want to do and how you want your performance to go, versus do you get any direction, whether it be from the director, from the producer? Because correct me if I'm wrong, there was a moment, and I apologize, Chris, I don't remember now. I think it was on your first time. I believe it was on your first time on the show, where you ultimately decided that even after getting, or maybe it was the finals, that you're gonna correct me, obviously, where you ultimately decided after kind of having the 1-2 punch with the dog and you being the show, you decided to kind of put yourself in the spotlight more, and it was less about your partner and more about you. And I remember the judges kind of saying, like, why'd you suddenly change? I mean, so how much is that you? How much of that is producers?
It's pretty half and half, I would say, because the producers are also helping you a lot. And I've learned this just through the experiences I've had with AGT, which have all been pretty great experiences. They're there to help you. But in the beginning, you're very skeptical, because obviously you're like, wait, if I don't want that, why would I do that?
Right.
So you kind of are like skeptical. There's a lack of trust. But once I've done it for a while, you trust them, because they can help you so much. Like, because if you were kind of like, I just want to do what I want to do, they can be like, okay, go ahead. But then you're not, you don't know how to run the screens that have the visuals in the background and the fireworks that pop up here and there. So, it's not, you create your piece in a way, but the stuff around it, that's the part that they can help you with. But even the stuff around it, there's a lack of trust in the beginning, like I said. But once you kind of trust it, it helps. And for example, with the dogs, afterwards, I remember after that one, I think it was Heidi that said it was the quarterfinals. And at that point too, the biggest thing for variety acts like myself is I think you almost run out of material, because there's a fine balance between being like, let's leave it all out there, let's get through, and then we'll deal with that bridge when we get there. But sometimes between rounds, there's only like 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, you're very limited as to what a basketball player is not, Bam Adebayo is not going to become a 3-point shooter overnight. So it's, or in 2 weeks even, so it's like, that's how it becomes. You need to work on that skill for a long time. And so like when I did the finals run, before I even started, I knew that the audition part I wanted to do by myself, because I wanted to kind of keep in my back pocket the dog part.
Yeah.
So I said that to them, and that was solely my decision. And even I think at the time they were like, no, you should use the dog because it will make you different. And I kind of fought them on it, because I was like, yeah, it will make me different. But if I reveal the dog now, then I don't have anything left to surprise in the next round. And even in the next round, I was like, I want to hold back with the dog, because the surprise will be revealing the dog. So that'll already be a wow factor, and I don't want to do too much. And then luckily that also worked out in my favor. And then I got to the quarterfinals. But once I got to the quarterfinals, then I had to go to the bigger tricks that I had with the dog, because that was what was left. And so when I made it through there, I was kind of out of material.
Yeah.
And I was a lot younger. Like if I did it now, I have a lot more material now. The basketball stuff, I didn't do any of that back then. So once I finished that one. The only thing left was like, do we add another dog or what can we do? And that's the producers putting ideas in your head, like, what should you do? So for me, I was like, you know what? At this point, let's try it. And I didn't feel super confident. And they were like, okay, well, this is our idea. And I remember them being like, we think that you're going to add the other dog. That's great. We'll make your theme Top Gun. Because they were thinking creatively, they'll put the airplane and they'll have the clouds in the background. And I remember I probably pissed off so many people because I was like, I've never seen that movie. And they were all so mad. They were like, what? They were like, you better watch it. And I had 2 weeks time to prepare. So then I was like, all right. So, and I didn't say this to them, but I started watching it and fell asleep and I never finished the movie. So,
oh man, come on.
I know. It's a classic. I need to get to it. But anyway, so at that point, all the creative ideas was theirs, and they obviously were like, what, they're just kind of how they can't tell me what balancing handstand tricks to do because that's not their expertise.
Sure,
they kind of leave that up to you. Once you start trusting them, you're like, all right, well, I can't tell you what to do with the theme and with the stuff in the background because that's your expertise, and I know that you're going to have my best interest. And so that's what happened with that. And then, obviously, then in the final, that didn't go so well, and I knew it didn't go so well. I tried to do a magic trick reveal, and that was the producers leaving it up to me, being like, all right, you want to do that? We don't know much. That's kind of your fort, And that didn't go so well. And so after that, obviously, I was like, well, I'm lucky I got through even the semifinals, and now that we're in the finals, I was kind of like, I think I just want to do some stuff for myself. And they were like, yeah. And then they wanted to dress it, the background and the costume and stuff, however they wanted.
All right. The one thing I should have asked a long time ago, and we've only probably got a little more than 10 minutes left here. You come in at a young age again into the circus world. You're growing up in the circus. At what point, though, do you decide to involve animals? Mm-hmm. And how did you become so adept at training these animals as well and these dogs and realizing that this now, because that's a whole other component to the life. We can talk about the performance and the NBA stuff and school and broadcast and everything else, man. Most people can barely get their dog to sit down and pay attention. Here you are training dogs, and not just one. We go from Scooby to Percy to Milo and all multiple dogs and learning all these tricks. How is it that you realized that you had a knack for doing this and an ability to do this, and how do you make it all kind of come together?
So it's kind of, the way the act started was actually very random. I was, like I said, a kid growing up in the circus, so I wanted a pet. My parents were like, all right, we'll get you a little dog because it's easier to travel with, obviously. So that's how we got Scooby. And we didn't have an exact plan for doing an act with Scooby and how it would go. But Scooby would, he learned little tricks like most people would be like sit or lay down or whatever. And Scooby would do this little please thing that he did with his paws going up and down. And that's what we call the trick, the please. Because he would do that when we would be eating. So if we were eating dinner, he'd be over there on the floor doing it. So eventually one day I was watching TV and laying on my stomach on the floor, and he was kind of sitting on my back, just hanging out. And my dad started eating, and he started doing that while sitting on my back.
Okay.
And I was already practicing handstands. I started practicing hand balancing when I was 10 years old. At this point, I was probably 12. And my dad was like, oh, that's funny. It was just kind of, I was like, the whole family that we were sitting there were like, oh, that's funny. He's doing that while he's sitting on my back. And my dad was like, tomorrow when you go practice, you should try doing that trick and see if he still does that trick like that while you're doing your handstand kind of trick. So it was a copy and paste thing. And that's how the act got started. And obviously from there it evolved. And so that's why I have such a hard time letting go of the name Christian and Scooby. And obviously by now, because people have gotten to know it, but I'm like, I wouldn't be doing this with Percy or with Milo had it not been for Scooby starting this. And then with Percy, actually, I should mention, there's a second dog named Prince that we got once the act kind of took off. And before I went to college, when I was probably 16, we got Prince to take over. But Prince is like a lazy and chunky Chihuahua who he did not have he learned the tricks, but we could tell he was slower and it was kind of a hassle for him. So we were like, all right, he's not really the performing type. And then we got Percy, like I said, and Percy picked it up right away. And he was kind of randomly thrown into the spotlight as well in Madison Square Garden. And he nailed it. And and so I would say he's the most surprising performer so far because his personality kind of doesn't match his performing stage presence. Because Percy is super, delicate, and he's like a sleepy dog, and he, doesn't like to play with toys or anything. But when we're on the stage and the spotlight hits, he's like tail wagging, jumping, let's get it kind of thing. So he's the most like surprising. And once I kind of started learning things with Percy and teaching him, that's where it really was the strength in that for me. I feel like it's just communication and just learning that they all have like humans, like kids learning anything, they all have different personalities. And so what may work for one doesn't work for the other. A trick that may be easier for one may not be for the other. And that's kind of how you develop and you evolve the act. And so with the newest pup, and that's really where I've kind of, people are always like, oh, you're a good trainer. I've never thought of myself at all as a dog trainer. I've never, ever thought that. And now that with Milo, I will admit, I had a little bit of a moment where I was like, man, like, I'm pretty dang good at communicating with them. The fact that he can dunk. That trick really became that one felt so original because even the Percy walking on the basketball trick, I was at a gym with a basketball and I had Percy with me and I saw a kid walking on like a little globe. And so like when I saw that, I was like, I wonder if Percy would do it. And so I tried with him. Obviously he didn't do it right away, but I was like, I think if I keep at it, he'll eventually start picking it up. And he did. And then now Milo did. But the dunk trick, once Milo picked that up, and that's also, like I said, it's just listening to them because Milo is the opposite of Percy. He loves to play. Sometimes it's like annoying because he won't stop playing and he never gets tired. And he's always like coming by with the ball and I throw it and he'll play fetch for hours. And so I was like, all right, he loves this damn ball. Like I was like, he loves it so much. So I was like, what if I try to teach him something with it? And so that's kind of how that idea came about.
All right, loaded question here for about 5 minutes left in the show, but you tell me if I'm wrong with this. The circus game clearly over the years has changed from, elephants and tigers and lions and animals and horses and everything else, and it's more about performance-based circus now and humans doing various, feats of strength and acrobatics and whatnot. There's not as much and very little animal involvement. I know you've addressed this with people that have asked you this, so whether it be on Twitter, on Instagram, or in interviews you've done. There is a pocket of the population, and it's probably even crazier right now, not to try to tie what you're doing with Tiger King, but there's so many more people that are now thinking they're just so attuned to the animal world and to zoos and animal, cruelty to animals versus generosity and animal welfare and everything else. How do you deal with that? Some of the critics or skeptics that are out there saying what you're doing maybe isn't fair to them. Do they want to do this? Are they being forced to do this? Is this the way they should be? Should they even be performing? How do you handle all that stuff? Because I know it is out there kind of, at least with some folks.
For sure. So that part of it is something that kind of like when we talk about with America's Got Talent, I can only control what I can control. And so for me, I've very much, obviously, besides just knowing that you're good to them as a person, I've very much just taken the fact that I've worked with them, in like a playful way. So when we were at the house, like even Milo teaching tricks, like people are like, how often? You must practice for hours with them. And I'm like, definitely not. Like Milo right now, who's the one that's learning, obviously, and he hasn't done a full-on halftime show yet. Maybe, and it's not even every day. I don't know when's the last time I actually like practiced with him, probably like 5 days ago. But it's like 10 minutes at a time or 15 minutes at a time because I want him to feel that it's a game. Because for us, that's what it is. So when I go out there with Percy to perform, it's like playtime. And so with Milo, that's how especially with Milo, like I said, I saw him play with the ball. So I was like, okay, cool. He already considers this a game. So this is what we're going to do. So even a lot of times that if we are practicing somewhere and people are like, can I pet your dog? Or a lot of times that happens right before we go out for a halftime performance. People be like, can I pet your dog? And I'm always like, for sure. Because I want them to know, like, this is totally like a playtime. This is like, you have to. And I mean, like I said, too, they're all different personalities. So even Prince being the one that wouldn't really wag his tail like crazy, for me, I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to make him perform and do tricks because I do think that honestly speaking, the biggest strength of my act is that you can kind of see the chemistry that we have. And as like, that is what I think people, it just wouldn't even look, I wouldn't even want to watch something that doesn't seem like the dog's having fun. And it's also a message, I guess, that's very, it's a stereotype that even as someone that grew up into the circus, I think there are a lot of circus people that would fight it to the death and be like, no, like there's no animal cruelty or whatnot. But me being an honest person, like, no, I have seen it, and it has happened in the circus community. I've seen the animal cruelty, but the message that is missing is that even people in like a circus community don't like those people and do something about it. And that's the part that's missing. A true story, I specifically remember one time we were on the show, there was a lady that did a dog act, and we heard the dogs like whining and like crying. And somebody in our community called the police on her. Or I don't know if it's the police. I was too young, but I don't know if it was the police or dog, whatever.
Animal control
Animal control, and called it on her. And it wasn't like a person outside of the circus world. It was someone within. Because we also, it's not like everyone in the circus community is like cold and doesn't like that or doesn't care about that. And so that's something that, you know, with animals being away from the circus, like bigger animals that aren't really like domesticated, and Ringling Brothers obviously like falling down and whatnot. I think that there are a lot of animal trainers that for sure, but it's kind of like the whole example with like bad cops, you know, there are some bad cops. And I think the mistake is that people avoid the truth, because even some of the cops probably know a bad cop, and we wish that they'd come out and be like, no, you're right, that person is a crooked cop, and being like, but it's not everybody in the force. And that's kind of how it feels with animal training. And for example, like I said, I mean, I'm not friends or close with anybody that would mistreat their animal to do tricks, because I don't believe in that, and that's not in my kind of morals. And so it is a question that gets brought up, and, you know, all I can do is, I guess, show them through our work. I think if they didn't like it, it would be very evident. And obviously, like, I mean, I don't think people would see me doing that, because I wouldn't put them out there doing it if they didn't like it anyway. And it is one of those things. So maybe I need to be better about maybe to help people see that, doing more of like a live while we're practicing or whatnot. But I swear, I think people wouldn't even know that that's practice, because like, even now, if you want, I can run over and we make them do a trick, and it's just us playing. Like, and you do it, and that's it. And even when we're eating, they're doing tricks. And sometimes, if we're having dinner, I'll bring out the little basketball hoop, and I'll have him do it, and I'll give him a treat. And that is practice. That is how he's learning the tricks. So.
Well, listen, man, we're probably going to get the countdown here in about a minute or so. On my first episode with Elliot Friedman, the clock popped up, 30 seconds left, and we were like really rushing off the air, yelling at each other. So I was actually going to say, I'm sure some folks would love to see one of the dogs, but I don't know if there's much time left anyways. And to me, it was just good to chat with you anyway. And I think the coolest part of all this, is, let alone your life story and everything, is the fact that you were at Game 6. I mean, yeah. It sucks. It sucks what we're all going through. And obviously, I think I speak on behalf of both of us, whether it's in the U.S. for you, whether it's in Canada for me, let alone across the world, anybody that's watching. Our thoughts and prayers and our best wishes go out to everybody, especially the frontline workers, the doctors, the nurses that are keeping us all safe. But we need to get you back on the court soon. We need to get you back performing. We need to get the Raptors back. But at least for the time being, the Raptors are still the reigning champs. Christian, I appreciate you doing this, man. Hey, maybe we'll do it again and we'll bring the dogs in next time. But thanks for doing this. Thanks for giving your time and telling your story, and we'll talk soon.
No problem, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.